emit a pleasingly expensive masculine perfume from the smoking stand where its owner had placed it half-smoked. The young Negro was mildly upset. Mr. Warwick was reputed to be a generous tipper, and he'd neglected to lay out a gratuity. To help himself to a cigar from the open silver case violated railroad regulations as well as the porter's own standard of conduct. Instead, he poured an inch of brandy into a small silver-plated cup from the crystal decanter strapped inside the portable bar, flipped the brown liquid down his throat, polished the cup thoroughly inside and out with his handkerchief, and returned the cup to its loop inside the lid. With the spirit's heat spreading up from the floor of his stomach, he went to find the conductor. Hairline cracks radiating from the death by his own hand at age 54 of the well-known Chicago speculator, railroad investor, and meat-packing magnate reached as far north as Ontario, where he had maintained mining interests, and as far south as Venezuela, where his gifts to several key cabinet members had secured extensive investments in the trade in rubber and balata, a principal ingredient in the manufacture of gutta percha and chewing gum. The Texas cattle industry was concerned, as were his associates in New York City, who through their attorneys moved swiftly to demand an audit of all his books. For in the world inhabited by Warwick and his class, suicide had but two motives: money and women, and as the second was invariably tangled with the first, it little mattered which was the specific cause. This latest disaster, occurring when the bloody gash of the 1893 panic had not yet healed completely, further eroded stomach linings already worn as thin as vellum. As it happened, the news reached John C. Broughty at Windvale, his 12-acre estate on Long Island, just as he was showing an early holograph manuscript of John Donne's 1624 poem, No Man is an Island, to a baron from the court of Kaiser Wilhelm II. The baron was considering trading some documents signed by Frederick the Great for it, along with mineral rights in the Ruhr Valley. Broughty, 73 and determined to extend his mastery of the 19th century into the 20th, listened to his butler's announcement that a gentleman awaited him on the telephone, invited the Herr Baron to examine the parchment at his leisure, and excused himself to squeeze into the cork-lined closet he'd installed in his front hallway to accommodate the instrument. The caller was a railroad dispatcher in his employ, relating the circumstances as they'd been wired to him by the conductor on the train from Chicago to New York City. Broughty cross-questioned the man, who assured him that no one knew the details apart from himself, the conductor, and the porter, both of whom the dispatcher had admonished by return wire to say nothing to anyone. And the telegraphers, of course, he added, but they're bound by the seal of the profession. Bind them by mine as well. I own 60,000 shares in Western Union. What about the police? The dispatcher replied that he'd arranged for the man in charge of the Michigan City branch of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency to secure the stateroom when the train stopped there and to exercise his discretion with the local authorities. Broughty knew the detective's name and approved of this decision. He shouted instructions to remain by the telephone, got the operator on the line, and placed a call to his attorney. He smoked the better part of a cigar while waiting for the connection, with the door open to let smoke out of the closet. Pulling it shut and extinguishing the stump, he made arrangements for an immediate audit. "My firm represents Warwick," the attorney shouted back. "Shall I inform the widow?" "Ask her to make no funerary decisions until I've spoken with her." "She'll want to know why." "She and Warwick have benefited from my counsel for 20 years. Send your best man to remind her of that. Your most diplomatic man. Go yourself." His next call was to Gordon Lindsay, his personal secretary, whom he instructed to call and wire his associates with the news of Warwick's sudden death, sans details, and a request to come to Windvale at their earliest convenience that evening. Then he pegged the receiver and returned to his guest. By 11 o'clock, 5 men who had twice rescued the United States Treasury from bankruptcy were gathered in Broughty's neoclassical library, which was fresh out of barrens, but well supplied as to illuminated manuscripts, European incunabula of the 15th and 16th centuries, and other literary spoils plundered from the capitals of the Old World. Between the glazed book presses and above the Levantine marble fireplace hung a new portrait of the owner, while below and in front of it, its subject struck the same unconscious pose, one thumb hooked inside the watch pocket of his vest and his good ear turned to the world. He was famously deaf in the other, the result of a childhood encounter with an exasperated streetcar operator, whose one brush with history was to box the ear of the future most powerful man in America. In the painting, and in person, Broughty's face frequently surprised people who knew him only by reputation. White-haired, pink-skinned, and clean-shaven, with the suggestion of a chronic smile about the mouth, he resembled one of those kindly corner druggists who were routinely taken advantage of by wholesalers and their own delivery boys. Governor Roosevelt, less easily impressed, had denounced him as the greatest threat to free competition since the Golden Horde. The 4 influential guests listened to the news about Warwick without interrupting, while Broughty's secretary, pock-marked and side-whiskered, sat with his hands folded in his lap, his writing block out of sight for the first time in memory. Cicero Lewiston, Banks, Shipping and Chocolate, was the first to break the silence. He was the fattest man in a company of notorious trenchermen. "Did he leave a note?" "None was mentioned. If he did, we'll get it from Pinkerton's." "We can either start unloading stock first thing in the morning before the price drops, or buy more at noon when it's down and counter the run." This was James Oliphant, railroads and mining, bald as a china plate beneath his gray bowler. "I don't see any third alternative." Broughty said, "There will be no run." Lewiston said, "The man killed himself. Stockholders are sheep. They'll stampede." "Sheep follow," Broughty corrected. "Cattle stampede. Never without reason. Outside of this room, only 5 men are aware Warwick's death was suicide. You all know young Lindsay." The secretary was 50. "It shouldn't be necessary to swear us 5 to secrecy as well. Warwick's wife doesn't know. I didn't even tell my attorney." "Still, it's 5 too many." Ignatius Frank, Refrigeration. 30 years after Louis Napoleon named him an honorary Chevalier of France, he still waxed his whiskers after the fashion of the defunct imperial court. "It's bound to come out." "Rumors." The host snarled the word the same way he said, "the press," at whom he'd been known to raise his stick. "Rumors are as bad as the truth. Worse. R.W. Gilbert, who held the patent on the Gilbert Hydraulic Perpendicular Railway, elevators, was a sallow-faced old widower who managed to depress people when he wished them a happy Christmas. "I'm not saying the market won't react," Broughty said. "It would do that if he died of apoplexy. It will adjust itself once the rumors are refuted by fact." Lewiston was a man for the basics. "What fact? The man killed himself." "The fact of his corpse." "Naturally, the coffin will be closed." Gloomy old Gilbert was an authority on funerary practice. Since burying his wife, he had attended 30 such services, many of them for complete strangers. The society correspondent for Harper's Weekly reported that he traveled with his own casket, as the genteel class were calling it now, in case he expired during a business excursion far from his Fifth Avenue brownstone. Naturally, a closed coffin would only fuel further rumors. "He will lie in state, and the viewing will be open to the public." Even the redoubtable Gordon Lindsay was agitated by Broughty's declaration. He unfolded his hands and refolded them the other way. The others yawped like terriers, all except Gilbert, who stared at the Turkestan and howled like a basset. Broughty lit a cigar, breathed the smoke in through his nostrils, and waited until the protests had crested. Then he said, Connable. This had the effect of dropping a lid on the noise.